Information to help you run your business better and improve your marketing campaigns. My name is Hank Hoffmeyer, and thank you for joining me on Hank's Marketing and Business Tips. Welcome to episode 268 of the Hmbt podcast. I'm back with a guest today. I'm joined by Traci Philips, the Innate Coach. Traci is the executive leadership and performance coach to Visionaries. I love it. And some things that we're going to talk about are really interesting today. And it's going to really rethink what you're doing and maybe how you do certain things. Because at the end of the day, on this episode, we want you to be successful. And that's what Traci's here to do today. Welcome, Traci.
Thank you so much, Hank. It's great to be here.
When I reached out to you, I said, I wonder why I haven't had Traci on the show, because you and I know each other from outside LinkedIn, outside the professional network. My wife is friends with you. And I think, I met you through her, and it was in the real world, not virtually. I don't know why I didn't have you on earlier, but I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air to talk about something called the Zone of Brilliance. And another thing is, making sure you're doing what you currently love to do and you're thriving, or maybe you're looking to do something or start a business, because I do have people that want to start businesses join the show, and maybe they need to find out what kind of business they should start. So let's start talking about what you talk about, the Zone of Brilliance. What is that? Because I'm very interested in that. I didn't poke around or do any research into that because I want to hear it from you.
I love that. Well, you're just like me, Hank, and what I love too is like our kids brought us together. So, it's like when you're the parent and then suddenly it's like, oh, what do you do for a living? So we have this crossover. It's the greatest thing. But yeah, so I want to give credit where credit's due. A number of years ago, I read a book called The Big Leap by a guy by the name of actually Guy Hendricks. And he's a coach, he's a writer, author, speaker. He's been around for a while. And I love the concept of this book because he actually framed it as zone of genius and zone of excellence. Okay. And he started with just kind of, again, making making the delineated line, in the sand between genius being what you're born with, what you're naturally good at, and excellence kind of being those things that you learn along the way. I took it a little bit further in my work because I'm like, this is fantastic. And of course, we want to name things according to what makes sense to us. And so that concept of genius I see as brilliance, which can be, in the dictionary can kind of be synonyms for one another. But the zone of achievement is what I call zone of excellence, because to me, excellence kind of didn't really define it well enough. Right. And so this idea of achievement, what do we do once we come out of the birth canal, right? We're kind of taught, hey, you're not valuable until you produce something valuable. And so this idea of achieving, right? Having to achieve something, and in that achievement is the value, right? And then we hang our own hats on that, right? Our own identity then becomes that value that we have produced through our achievements.
Right. I love that. That's great.
Yeah. And, but, we've been really very conditioned to believe that it is our achievements that, right. It's what I call the alphabet after our name, right? So when you look on somebody's resume, it's all of the schooling, all of the experience, all of the things we've done, even though we're human beings, we really have been conditioned to be human doers, doings. And, some of the concepts that we're dealing with today, like imposter syndrome, for example, right, where people have all these achievements and all these earnings and all of these, magnificent things on their resume, and yet they don't feel fulfilled. They feel like a phony. They feel like a fraud. And my belief in that is because we didn't come here to be valued through our achievements. I mean, those are great, and it certainly helps the world, but we came here to be truly valued through our brilliance, right? Through our innate gifts, our innate talents, our innate traits, the things that nobody else could ever teach us because they're inborn, right?
Right.
And so that's the piece that I think that until we start to really show up and produce through our brilliance, we feel like something's missing. Like, I don't really deserve this. I don't feel worthy. I don't, there's a lot of different angles we can take that worthiness concept, but I really believe it comes from this first and foremost.
I think you mentioned a few things, and in my mind, I'm correlating some things. And you talked about excellence. You can
Mm-hmm.
excel at something but not like it or not be happy
Right.
doing what you're doing. You can excel at sports, but maybe you did it because your mom and dad told you to do it. But maybe you don't like doing it. You kick and scream going to practice when you're young, but you can excel at it. But brilliance usually means you love what you do, and the outcome comes because of you really like what you're doing and you care about the outcomes. Sometimes you get the letters
Mm.
after your name because you went to school, but you didn't like going to school and you have the letters. And sometimes maybe you have an MBA or you have a doctorate, but then you end up doing something totally different. Maybe you work for a nonprofit or you go overseas to donate your time to make a difference in the world, in third world countries or something. And it has nothing to do with the letters after your name, but you become brilliant at what you do and you're making a difference and making an impact. And I think that people really need to turn around and look at what they're doing and say, am I doing what I'm happy doing? Or do I need to change some things? Now, I'm not saying quit your job and do something else, but maybe find the brilliance in what you do. And it reminds me about the company I'm with now. We totally crafted a position around what I'm good at and what I like to do. And I think it benefited both the organization and me. I love what I do and I'm making an impact for the organization. That's what it comes down to is finding your brilliance. How do you work with people, or what tips do you give to people to say find your brilliance? Or what you and I were talking about off air is knowing where you really and truly thrive.
Yeah, it's such a great question. Well, first of all, I want to say that what you and your company did together, that is brilliant. That's exactly how it's meant to be done. Right. And I think one of the things that makes it really hard to find this brilliance and define it is because we start with conditioned belief systems like you have to work hard to earn it. Right. Our zone of brilliance is something that is so natural to us that we don't even think it's special. Right. That's part of the problem. So when we didn't have to work hard for it, we're like, well, that's not valuable. I didn't have to work for it. When in reality, that's the thing that's most valuable and shiny about us. Right. But we just keep pushing it to the side. Like, no, that's too easy. That's not valuable. And so it's really about flipping the script on that storyline and that conditioning and saying, no, it's what is easy. But sometimes it's like with the white on rice analogy, it's so close to us that we have no perspective and we can't see, right? That's a blind spot. And so, one of the things to answer your question that I help clients to start to define, because for me, definition is key. Like we ground ourselves through being able to explicitly and express very, very clearly what that is, right? Otherwise, it's just a kind of a general concept that we carry around. As I ask them, what are things that have been told to you over the years that can start at a very young age or somewhere, a little bit later on that surprised you? And that can be either negative or positive. And I'll give you an example from my own life is like when I was a kid, I was always told I was a troublemaker. And I remember vividly as a kid at times when I was being told that I was a troublemaker, just completely not understanding that because where I was coming from was not troublemaking. It was legitimate curiosity. But in the environments I was in, that wasn't warranted. That wasn't wanted. Right. I came in, one of my brilliances is, I mean, this is what we always get as visionaries. You have it too. It's just where we show up in our particular brilliance can be in different categories, but
Right.
we look for gaps. Like you were saying that you look for solutions. Well, so do I. And so one of the things I came in with was an ability to read people's language and hear the gaps and see it in their body language. So if somebody was telling an untruth, let's say, I don't want to say lie, but they were not completely disclosing the truth, I could tell. And I became incredibly curious. And so I start asking questions. And what do kids do? They have no filter. So it's just like, no, that's not really true. What's the truth? And I would get in trouble. I would be disrupting in a troublemaking way. And I'd be stuck in the corner or pushed outside the classroom or whatever it was. And in reality, we're taught to be honest and be truthful. And I was just telling the truth as I saw it, but it was getting me in trouble. So these mixed messages oftentimes can make us shut down those abilities that we have because we're told they're wrong or bad or just not warranted. So that was a negative, but I also was told I was wise. I had one particular aunt that would always say, how do you see these things? Where does this come from? Like, you're so young. How are you so wise? And as a young kid, I didn't know what wisdom was. I thought it was intelligence. So I'm like, oh, I'm smart. So you just kind of focus on that piece and we miss the messages. right? We completely miss what all of these things are pointing to. And it wasn't until later on that I became a coach that I started to define these qualities within myself. I'm like, I can just listen to people's language and unpack their zone of brilliance and what's blocking them. And as I started to feed things back to people and I was spot on every time, people were like, how do you do that? And I had to stop and think, how do I do that? And then of course a lot of things started to become, we start to put the dots together. But that's
Right.
what I do. I walk the clients through this. Okay, let's go back and start pulling out the things that we were not taught to look at or look for. And let's start defining what the value is on
Right.
those things, right? As we look at it from a different perspective.
I think it's interesting because sometimes people think they know what they want, but maybe they're scared or they don't know
Yeah.
how. I want to do X, but I don't know how. And then maybe you could probe and you find out, well, you don't really want X. You want the outcome of X, but you don't really want X. Like maybe somebody wants to be a vice president, right? And they, like you said earlier, are told that's linear, right? That's the
Right.
progression. You go from entry level to team lead to manager to VP. But maybe somebody like me, I think I don't think I'd make a good VP, vice president. Maybe for a nonprofit because I am currently, but that's a different story and totally, not my career path. But I solve problems. I roll my sleeves up. I get involved. And as you go up the level of leadership, you have to do less and less. You're more inspirational to get more other people to do it. But I love getting involved. I love hopping in and solving problems and doing the things. And that's where I'd probably struggle if I was a vice president or a president of a company. And I always said I can never be the CEO of my own company. If I started my own company and I was a consultant and I was going to start hiring other people under me, et cetera, I would never be able to be the CEO because I would give everything away for almost free and I would work too much. I would need a CEO to tell me what to do. I can be maybe the COO or something like that, but I would
Be
need
the
somebody that
president.
keeps us on track.
Right. Well, and that's what visionaries do. I mean, we do certain things really, really well. One of them is those high level relationship, and we're very relational by nature. We have that high degree of wanting to connect with other people on a high level, right? On that 40,000-foot level. That's not the nitty gritty in the day to day, right? That's not the management and the detail oriented stuff, which we're not good at naturally. And so the CEO, if you think of what a CEO is, right, that's the person who executes. Not so much in our wheelhouse, but where we are great is the innovation, the ideas, the
Yep.
growth, right?
Mhm.
Growing the company. For companies that are looking for those big accounts, right? They're the ones to build the relationships at that high level, right? That's, so you could call that president, right? Or owner, whatever you want to call it. But I actually think you would be a great VP. Again, it depends on the company and how it's run. Like your company saw the vision of saying, you know what, we need to create, you have brilliance. We could really benefit from that brilliance. How do we create a position that
Right.
works for you, works for us? Like that's what we're talking about. Companies like that, you would thrive as a VP because companies like that, the VPs are very engaged. Now, they're not engaged in all the details, but they're engaged in a certain way that would bring out a lot of the skill sets that you naturally have. So, again, I think we tell ourselves this story. I had this great opportunity a number of years ago to volunteer for it was 3-year period at Butner Federal Prison. And I worked with male inmates there who were at the minimum security camp. So these were the white collar crimes, like the Bernie Madoffs, right?
Right.
Most of them were ex executives. They had, had lots and lots and lots of excellence in their lives, right? They had, very high levels, and some of them Harvard grads, some of them, graduated top honors, all of these values that our culture has said, oh, that makes for an excellent person, and they were incarcerated. Why were they incarcerated? To the point you made earlier, is most of them, when I dug in and really started to ask those baseline innate questions, none of them wanted to go into the area of career that they went into. Many of them went kicking and screaming. Again, to your point earlier, when you're talking about, the push and they would give the different, the different answers for that. Oh, my parents, my dad was third generation CEO, or, my parents were like, it just wasn't, you had to go to MIT or whatever it was, and you had to get a particular
Right.
kind of job. But when I asked them, all of them, who they really felt they were down at the core, I would hear the artists, the musicians, the things that the skill set that they were expected to have as a CEO or a top operating executive was not right in that wheelhouse of what they innately, had. And so they felt like a phony and a fraud. And the more they felt like a phony and a fraud, the more they made decisions that were out of alignment with who they were. And it just ended up getting them where they were. And so this is the piece that I took away during that time was like, who else is incarcerated in this concept of what they should be doing and then making decisions that are out of alignment because they're out of alignment.
Right.
Right. And how can I get to the people before they become incarcerated? Right. Because my area of interest is really those, business owners and corporate executives, because I feel like it's an area, especially working with these men, that's underserved, right? Yes, they have executive coaches, but are those executive coaches helping them do the things we're talking about right now?
Yeah. Well, there's a difference
Right?
between executive coaches, somebody that's going to help you be an executive, and what you do, which is you're trying to help people find out what their brilliance is. And if we
Mm-hmm.
look at people that maybe start their career or currently in levels like, a customer success manager or a support role or something, some people end up, they become locked up in their mind to keep the prison mentality, and they
Right.
either feel like they can't do more, or that they don't want to rock the boat because they have benefits, a steady salary, and maybe there's something they like, but they don't feel like they can make a living at that, and they need to realize what their brilliance is and go after that. What would you say to someone like that? They say, I want to make more money, I want to make a difference, and I want to do more, but I have a really stable job where I'm doing okay. How do you think, those people really can unlock themselves or unlock their minds?
A lot of it is tapping into what they're losing in the meantime, because we're focused on the money in the game, right? When it comes to the financial, security and, again, what we've been taught to look for and build. But I'm saying to these people, what are you losing every day that you're in an arena that doesn't resonate with you? Right? I said this, and I'll share this because obviously names are not involved here, but I had a client, who was diagnosed with a disease, a very serious one. And as we started, and this was once we were, I think, a couple months into our coaching, and this person, shared with me, some of the backstory about, feeling misaligned in certain areas. And when we had a real heart to heart, and this client was sharing how much these things were important to sacrifice in order to have the lifestyle or the living, I
Mm-hmm.
said, what do you think that's costing you? Because I'm going to make a connection for you that might sound a little bit hard, but I'm going to make it anyway because I care and because I'm your coach and you're paying me for this. Don't think you're aligned if you have a disease. Our body will tell us, right? If we're out of alignment, our body will tell us every single time. It's usually the last to come along. It takes a long time, but that just shows how long we've been out of alignment. But you cannot tell me that it's okay when you have a disease because your body's telling you something else. So what is it costing you? It's costing you your health and
Wow.
potentially your life. Right. So that's a hard, and thankfully this client, I mean, again, I work with people who are ready for this process, but I would say, what is it costing you? Because it is costing you something. You've probably pushed it down. You've probably tried to tell yourself. I mean, I tell you so many clients that they're like, and I remember a client one time and I was pulling some stuff out of him. And I said, well, so how do you, feel things are? He's like, I'm fine. I said, okay, say that again in exactly the tone. I'm fine. Are you? Because this is the place where we get to be honest with ourselves. And I think if we don't, whether it's with a coach or whether it's with a mentor or whether it's with a, you know, a priest or somebody who's supportive, like we have to have somewhere where we can go and get really honest with ourselves. Because if we're not, like, to your point of what did you call it? Like, you're not a workaholic, you're a frolic,
Work or
or
frolic.
work a frolic, which I think is fantastic. I love that. You need it on a t-shirt.
I have it on a
But
hat, actually.
oh, I love it. The swag. We need the swag. Well, that's the brilliance, right? That's the brilliance coming through, is that when we start to put those connections between what we love and what we're doing, we're in the right zone. We're in the
Right.
right place. But if we're having to convince ourselves we're fine, like anytime somebody I hear in language, it's all good, I'm fine, it's
Yep.
okay, I'm like, oh, we got some digging to
Right.
do, because that's always a red flag for me. Did you come here to live this amazing life and just be fine? Like that? No, I'll answer
Right.
that for you. And so that's I would say we really need to look at what, if it's not aligned, what is it costing us? Because that bigger why is going to be the motivator that we need to
Right.
utilize.
Three things to unpack here. One is more just a statement, but last week I recorded an episode because I went for a physical and I talked about the importance of getting those checkups. And I talk
Yeah.
about your body communicating to you when something's wrong, but I also say sometimes you can catch it before it communicates with you. And that's the importance of going for a physical. And then also some people might need to get a mental checkup, especially with COVID and the
Yeah.
pandemic. It's important more than ever to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't enjoy your successes, which is exactly what I said in last week's episode. So I don't know why we're thinking along to save Winglands here. Um, Another item was a gentleman I follow, and he has podcast, everything, YouTube, Peter Voog. He talks about,
Mm,
people that get stuck in jobs, and somebody might say, I have 20 years experience. And if you're doing the same thing, you don't have 20 years experience. You have 1 year of experience repeated 20 years. And he always talks
that's
about,
great.
and what is that, that movie Up in the Air or whatever, where they talk about, yeah, it's like, how much do they pay you to give up on your dreams? $60,000, etc. But he also talks about, if you are with a company and they truly care about who they are and they do compensate you and you feel like it's fair and they're looking out for you like my company does, then okay, it's worth it. But maybe you need to really look at what you're doing and make sure that you are in your zone of brilliance. But I think so many people are scared to take risk, whether it's moving to a new company, starting their own business. But I think
Mm-hmm.
you have, what is it, one trip around this earth, one life to
Yeah.
live. And if you want to live life on your terms, another term from Peter Voog, you need to make sure that you're doing what you love so you can do more of it, excel at that, and create whatever it is, great content, great widgets, great service. You'll be happier. And a lot of people think, like you were talking about, the people that are in jail, they might get forced to do some things and become CEOs when they don't want to, and they get the money, but they're suffering. Maybe it's their health or time. But sometimes if you're really doing what you love and the time just flies by, the money comes. It'll
It
come.
does.
And everybody lives to their salary. I remember, I started making $30,000 a year when I entered the workforce, and I could, like, barely put anything into savings, or I was putting a decent amount. It's like I'm making a lot more now, similar struggles. I think you spend what you make. I honestly do. And you could be
Yeah.
happy in any salary bracket. It's just, what is success to you? And
That's the key right there, Hank. And I think that it seems far riskier for me not to live in my zone of brilliance in this one life than to risk what it would take to go out there and do that. It's like what I'm losing, because I think in terms, and I talk to my clients about this in terms of legacy, right? What do you want to leave behind?
mm-hmm.
Both when you're on your deathbed, if you have, the opportunity to look back, if it's not a sudden, goodbye, Saranara, but, to look back, and what do you want to look over and say, I did. I love the Wayne Dyer quote when he says, the true travesty in life is when the music dies within you, right? In other words, you're not able to play your music for the rest of the world because you're too afraid to put it out there.
Right.
And I really think that to me, that's riskier. And when we can, that intrinsic motivator, right, towards living our true destiny, as it were, or our legacy, for me, the mission I'm on is more important than any fear that might come up in order
Nice.
for me to reach that mission. So it's like all the time. And yet there are tools that we can learn. I mean, you and I both know, because we've learned some of them, and we teach them, with the people we work with in certain ways, but there's ways to overcome fear. You don't want to just say, oh, I'm fearful, therefore I'm stopping, right? Fear is, first of all, an illusion that has a lot to do with our mindset and the story we're telling ourselves. So we need to flip that script. But two, it's there to grow you unless you look at it as a perpetrator, right? If you allow it to keep that bully to keep you in place, you're going to stay the victim,
Yeah.
right, of your own life. Who wants to be the victim.
Too
Personally,
many
I
people,
want to be the
sadly.
star of my own show. I don't want
Right.
to, play
Well,
the
you miss
victim.
100% of the shots you never take, right?
That's exactly. Like that would be the word, that would be hell, right? Where you're like doing all these brilliant things and that you can't, you're the missing common denominator in experiencing that.
Right.
Everybody else is valuing your brilliance except for you.
Right. Well, a lot of
Right.
people, some people know me, some people don't really know me very well, but I went to school not thinking I was going to make anything of myself. Never went to college right away. I ended up going later because I didn't know the system. I didn't know I can get loans, and my parents didn't know and didn't help me. But finally, I figured that out. But then I was doing blue collar work. I was doing landscaping until I met a wonderful woman, my wife Amy. She said you need to get an office job. I ended up going into staffing, which was low pay, high stress. I did that for a long time. Then I took a huge step back to get into technology with the type of work I'm in now, working for a software provider, and I've grown ever since. And I've taken risks all along the way, huge pay cuts, or saying, "Hey, I'll never get an office job to keep." And I kept trying. I went on interviews and went on interviews, and finally I got a shot. And that's what it comes down to: is looking at what you want to do, and there's going to be those stumbling blocks. There are going to be the challenges, and I always say, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to become homeless, right? But if you are brilliant, you won't stay homeless long. I mean, this day and age, being homeless is a lot different. I mean, there's people that truly, I believe, want to be homeless, but you can get a Google Voice number, right? If you become homeless, you still have a phone number. You can check the phone number. You can go to the library and check your email and get your resume out there. You can make it. The worst that can happen by trying something is failing. You're going to lose your 4-bedroom house, right? Your $3,000 square foot 4-bedroom house, your 3 cars, and you might have to live in a 2-bedroom apartment and drive a crappy car for a while because you failed. But then maybe the next time you try, you become a millionaire. You have to try.
Yeah. And maybe you don't fail. That's the other thing
That's
too
it.
about taking risks. Maybe you take that risk and you succeed wildly. And so that's the thing that I always tell people, it's like when we're just focused on the destination, will I win? Will I lose? Right? We miss out on all the growth and all the experience during that growth. And that's really what life is. Life isn't about the 2 destination points of birth and death. It's about what happens in between.
That's right.
Right. And so that's the piece that life is risky. Nobody promised us. I mean, I think we see big trends now towards safetyism, and this is a whole different conversation. I think we need to like talk about it, another time. But people become so indentured to this concept of staying safe and what that means because we're looking to the outside world
Yeah.
to provide that for us.
Yeah.
You outside world environment, you need to make it safe for me. And that's never been a promise ever. We've never come into this world and been promised we're going to be safe or that we're going to win or that everything's going to be okay. And yet somehow we have in this mindset currently that that's supposed to be the case. And so that's the piece. And I'm talking about the generations coming up. And so,
Yeah.
but we all experienced this and created this together. And so we all get to be a part of the solution if we choose to. And I think part of it is saying, again, I always like to ask the question, what is it costing me? Right? Maybe it's not costing me financially. Maybe I'm making financial gains over here, but it's always a balancing act where I put into whatever I need to get this gain over here. I'm having to let go of something else or give something else up over here. So as long as this over here is something I don't want as much as this over here, then we're good.
Yeah.
But if I'm giving up my soul of who I am and my brilliance of what I came here to design in the world for this thing I was taught to value and put up high on a pedestal, now we've got an issue.
Right.
And guess what's going to happen? We're going to start seeing it show up in our relationships, in our health, in the accidents that we're having. And like people are like, oh, I'm so accident prone. I'm like, ooh, we got to look at that.
Yeah.
Because there's a reason you're misaligned. And again, the good news I always tell people is there's ways to get you back in alignment, right? And we get to learn, and that's going to be fun,
Right.
And so I think that's the message I want to tell people is it's never too late. And to your point, how bad can it get? Well, I don't know. That's up to how much you want to block yourself off from what you came here to be and do.
You make it sound a lot better than I do. I guess I paint the negatives more than the positives, because there are so many positives as long as you find what you're really brilliant at and you have a great idea. I mean, you can be brilliant and have bad ideas too. Just make sure you're talking to somebody like Traci or someone else around, hey, I want to get back into flipping, baseball cards or something. And maybe that's not the best idea right now, or maybe it is. I don't know. Obviously, Bitcoin's something that some people should have gotten into a long time ago, but it's a little too late for everybody now. But things like that. And a lot of people always look at other people and are jealous, the successful people. And you
Yeah.
have the same 24 hours as anyone, as somebody that's not successful and somebody that is. You need to audit what you're doing. And like you said, it's what you said, what are you giving up or what are you not giving up? Can you give up scrolling Facebook for 3 hours and maybe go create some content that's going to help grow a business? Maybe you're not aligned if you're doing that, right? And you're on TikTok for hours on. I get sucked in sometimes. I have to, after like 5 minutes, I have to say, no, 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 I'm getting off, because it's just, there's so many creative people on there and people do make money on there, obviously.
Yeah.
But I know you have your own show. I want you to talk about
Mhm.
that, because I think people need to go from, where they're listening to us right now, find you so they can get you on a more regular basis, because I think you're brilliant at what you're saying today and people need to hear you more. Tell me a little bit about your show.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. So the show I'm doing actually came up as kind of a cute little backstory. So the beginning of 2020, I had been having these every 2 week phone calls with my friend Wilwyn Port, who is a business consultant. So he consults to small business owners, and brilliant at what he does in that arena. But we just hit it off when we first introduced, and so we would have these conversations, and all of a sudden, and we're quarantined and everything, and we're all looking for fun things to do. And so Wilwyn says, what do you think about going live with our conversations? Because some pretty interesting stuff comes up, because we're both deep thinkers.
Right.
And I was like, sure, why not? Let's see what happens. And so literally that's what we did. We just threw it out there. We weren't really promoting it. We were just kind of sharing it with our friends and that kind of thing. And it just blew up, and we enjoy it so much. And so they're unscripted conversations. We don't have a plan. We come on, it's every 2 weeks, Wednesday, 1 o'clock on Facebook. We do have a page, so you can find us at Eavesdrop in the Moment on Facebook. And we also have a YouTube channel by the same name, where all of the playbacks are. So if people missed, certain episodes, you can go back and listen all the way from the beginning. But we talk about life. We talk about what we're talking about right here, but digging into, he comes more from a religious background. So he puts a lot of that into it. I'm more from a spiritual aspect of things, but really it's just the two of us in real time having real conversations about real stuff. And it really is amazing what comes through in those conversations. It's like breakthroughs. Last one, he made me cry. I mean, it was like, you never know what you're going to get, but it's good stuff, and we really enjoy it. And we're not, I mean, to your point, I think Visionaries, this is where Visionaries, like Disney didn't know how to balance his checkbook. I mean, if it hadn't been for his brother Roy, everything we know as Disney today wouldn't have happened, because he did not know how to manifest his visions. Most of us who are visionaries need integrators to help us bring that. So whether it's your job, your company that's your integrator, right? They're kind of the one holding the bag to help you funnel your
Right.
brilliance into that, or whether it's a person in your company, visionaries need integrators, right? To make things happen. And so I think for us, we're not looking to necessarily make money or make this thing into the best podcast of, the year. We're simply trying to create a space for this that we're creating if it's needed and where it can support people, kind of like your podcast. So that's the show.
All right. Links in the show notes, folks. I encourage you to check it out. And, we can go on and on. I'm going to have Traci on in the future again, definitely. But if folks wanted to find you, connect with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, the best way, I mean, to connect with me is to to go to my website. I mean, if people are curious as to how I do what I do, it's all there. I mean, it's one-stop shopping. You can also contact me through, my contact me on the webpage, but I'm also on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. So I can be found in those places as well.
Awesome. If you catch her on Facebook Live, make sure to drop a comment in the chat there. Let her know that you came from my podcast to show some love. They'll appreciate that. And it was great having you on, Traci. I think, I learned a little bit. You fired me up to go out and make sure I'm not sacrificing something in order to be more successful, whether it's in love, life, professional, whatever it is. because we need to make sure that we're brilliant at what we do, love what we do, and we kind of touched on making sure you're staying healthy, because I think there's a symbiotic relationship there between what you do for work and your health.
Absolutely, there is. And again, that's where we reside, is in this one body, right? So if we don't have our health, we don't have our life. And so I think that that's the key piece that I would absolutely be with you on that, and that message of saying, if your body is telling you, that things are not feeling quite right, yes, go to your doctor, get the checkups, get things checked out. Don't put it off, because again, this body is your life. So, take care of it the best you can.
Awesome. Folks, if you want to hear previous episodes, go to hankhoffmeyer.com/Alexa. I'm on Spotify, YouTube, your Amazon, Alexa, iTunes, probably a bunch of other places that I haven't found yet. Listen to previous episodes, repeat this one, go check out Traci's show. And until next time, folks, stay brilliant.